Hey guys, Marshall Mathers the fourth here, back to you with another video today. And in today's video, I would like to talk about everything I've been deprived and underprivileged of having or experiencing growing up. And the first of many things that I had been deprived and underprivileged of growing up and didn't get to experience growing up since I was a kid up until this very point in time was that I never got to be raised in a city compared to many other people of so many different races that had the privilege and had the luck of being raised in a city where there is lots of job opportunities that I'm sure the majority of people look forward to when they start growing up and coming into their teens, that at least at first they can be very excited about, whereas I myself didn't get something like that. I didn't get that sort of experience where I was raised in a city, and since I was a kid I got to not only experience diversity growing up since I was a kid, but also in my teens look forward to and be really excited about finding and getting a job that would have been of interest to me and that I would have possibly enjoyed, at least for a certain amount of time. And, you know, I really would have loved being able to experience diversity since I was a kid, because not only do I think that's the very best time in pretty much at least most people's lives to experience as much as you possibly can, especially knowing that if you're a kid and you got to go to inner city public schools because your parents just so happened to raise you in a city full of diversity. And sadly, in this country, diversity, especially in northern states, is only really exclusive to the people who get to be raised in cities, who are just very blessed and fortunate enough of being raised there since they're babies, pretty much. And I just honestly feel like I've been robbed of something so wonderful. I've been deprived and underprivileged of that, of being able to experience that in my life personally, just as much as those other people themselves got to experience diversity since they were little kids. And it honestly drives me crazy that so many other white people got to experience diversity growing up as little kids and teenagers who got to be raised in cities, then compared to someone like me who spent most of my childhood very secluded and isolated and alienated and distanced and kind of kept and prevented from experiencing a lot of things that it seems like most kids themselves get to experience. And I really resent white people in this country who got to experience diversity even as young as like 5 years old. Any white people who got to go to any inner city public schools where even since kindergarten there was a lot of diversity in that school, and so that white boy or white girl, ever since either one of them was like 5 years old, got to make friends with and interact with kids from other races, other cultures, other backgrounds, or whatever. And if there's any like foreign exchange students or like immigrant students who just recently came over to America and are trying to learn the English language or whatever and trying to become an American citizen or whatever, like those white students get to even have the opportunity, chance, and experience of being able to become friends with an immigrant student or a foreign exchange student. And I really have it in for all white people who got to experience diversity growing up as kids. And the reason why I think that's the best time to experience something like that is because when you're kids, you don't think about race. You don't think about, oh, this student that I'm friends with or whatever has a different skin color than me, or talks a little bit differently than me, or dresses differently than me, or acts and behaves differently than me. Like, as kids, you just think of your friends and other students that you're interacting with and experiencing as other people just like you, other human beings. And so you get really used to people of other races and other cultures ever since you're kids. Then they're not going to be like mysterious to you when you grow up. They're not going to be like aliens to you. And when it comes to someone like me personally, who's almost 24 myself and still hasn't experienced diversity to the very extreme point in like level that so many other white people in this country got to themselves ever since they were little kids, because they got to be raised in a city since they were kids full of diversity. And if they go to inner city public schools since kindergarten, it's very likely that they would probably interact with and experience students or kids from other races and cultures, and really getting to know them and really getting in good with them and just all around getting used to them. Whereas someone like me, when I think of Black Americans, Mexican Americans, Asian Americans, Muslim Americans, Indian Americans, or whatever, I think of them as aliens, as if they're a totally, completely different species of something all around. Like they're not even people. They're not even human beings, because they're so mysterious to me, because I have been alienated most of my life from ever interacting with and experiencing people of many different races and cultures, unlike so many other white people got to themselves, because of where I was born. Not where I was born, but where I was raised, even more so. Like, and that's kind of the interesting thing about it too. Like, depending on where you're born in this country, it will determine what your future will be, or what the outcome of your life will be, or the experiences that you yourself individually will have growing up as a child, as a teenager, in your 20s, 30s, 40s, and so on and so forth. Depending on where exactly you are raised, ever since you're baby or toddler, little kid, or whatever, will in fact determine what future experiences you yourself will have in your life, particularly. And same thing goes for everyone else. And when it comes down to it, people who get to be raised in cities get to experience so much more in life just all around than compared to someone who's spent most of their life in the country, in rural areas where there are not any communities of people. People in the country aren't social. They want to be left alone. People who even move to the country in the first place, they want to be secluded from the rest of society. They want to be distanced. They want to be left alone. They don't want to be bothered. They are introverts in the country, in rural areas, whereas people in the city are a lot more social, and they want to go out and see like new people and new faces and experience and take in as much of the environment as they possibly can, even since they're really young. And because I never had those experiences myself in my life, like, I'm not used to Black Americans. I'm not that used to Mexican Americans. I'm not that used to Asian Americans or Muslim Americans or Indian Americans or whatever. Like, I'm not used to really any other race of people other than white people, because that is the only race that I really ever got to experience to like the fullest degree. Like, so much to the point where I, honest to God, have become, even since years ago, bored and sick and tired of just experiencing the same old shit every single day and never experiencing anything new or anything like that I'm not used to or anything different, in other words. I just never had that experience in my life, so I really envy white people who got to be raised in cities who did get to experience that shit since kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, and so on and so forth. Whereas I myself did not get to experience that at all. I don't know what that's like. I don't know what it feels like. And now, because I have been so alienated, isolated, and excluded and just robbed all around and deprived and underprivileged of experiencing diversity growing up as a kid, or at least a teenager, I feel uneasy in the presence of any other race of people other than white people. The only race I'm really used to. Like, I feel uneasy, I feel nervous, I feel worried, I feel stressed out, I feel like anxious. I don't even feel worthy enough to be in the presence of certain races of people, especially when it comes to Black Americans, because I know that I stereotype them a lot, and that's because what the industry, the entertainment industry, portrays pretty much every Black American to be, and the music industry and the mainstream media pretty much always portrays all Black people in general to just be thugs, hoodlums, criminals, gangsters, whatever, and ghetto people. And you know, in my videos, I've never really said that all Black Americans are ghetto, or all Black Americans are thugs or criminals or gangsters or hoodlums or whatever. But even the people who are not a part of that culture, who don't like that culture, or who even hate it, or who are not going to stand for it and want to get out of that culture, most Black Americans are raised in the ghetto, though, whether they like it or not. And when I say that Black Americans are ghetto, I even just simply mean the way that they talk, then compared to white people. Like, Black Americans obviously do not talk in the same accent or use the same grammar that white Americans use themselves. They just don't. And Black Americans also have deeper voices than white Americans. And you know, they dress differently, they act and behave differently. I mean, Black Americans and white Americans have a totally and completely different culture that is very split, very divided, very separated and segregated from each other. And that's honestly one of the reasons why I don't think that when it comes to at least certain white people and Black people, they'll just never get along. They'll never connect, because they're not that much alike at the end of the day. Yeah, we're all human beings, or we're all people. We all bleed the same blood, We all feel the same physical and emotional and mental pains and sufferings, but our cultures are so very different from each other. They're so different from one another. And the only white people who are really even somewhat black, or even act or behave slightly like a black American does, are white people who got to be raised in cities, who got to go to inner city public schools since kindergarten. And then when these white people become teenagers, they become really obsessed and attached to and interested and fascinated with rap culture, ghetto culture, and they try so very hard to act black themselves. Like, a lot of white guys in their teens sag their pants, just like a lot of black teenagers. A lot of white guys try to talk black. And I mean, I would only understand that for the white guys who have been raised in the ghetto, like side by side, right next to black people, and we're just like in an ocean of black Americans, ghetto black Americans in specific. Those are the only white people who I could ever understand why they would talk black, or why they sound black, or act and behave black, or dress black, or come off as a black white person. And, you know, at least when it comes to specifically ghetto black people, the only people that those certain specific people really respect are ghetto white people, because of course ghetto white people at least have an idea and at least a bit more understanding of what it means to be a black American here in America. They go through similar sufferings or difficulties and hardships that a lot of these black Americans face on a day-to-day basis. But I missed out on experiencing something like that. I've been robbed and excluded and like just totally alienated, separated, and segregated from ever having the opportunity, chance, or privilege of being able to experience that, which I really wanted to for so fucking long, but never got to. And that's the truth. And other things that I have been deprived and underprivileged of having or experiencing growing up is that I never had any gaming consoles or video games of my own growing up as a child, as a kid, like most other fucking kids do in this country. Whether they're black, white, blue, purple, yellow, pink, whatever their race is, the majority of kids in this country of America got to have an experience growing up with their very own gaming consoles and video games that they clearly and obviously had a just really fun, wonderful time experiencing, especially if they got to experience it in their childhood. Because when you're a kid, that's when you're the happiest in your life. At least for most people anyways. And when you're a kid, this world to you is like a big playground. You want to experience it as much as possible. You're very interested and fascinated in this world and the things of it, or the things in it. And you want to experience as much as possible as a child. You always want to experience more and more and more and more. And if you get to, well, then you were lucky, blessed, fortunate, privileged, and spoiled. Because I never got that experience myself. As a kid growing up, I never had a single goddamn gaming console or video game of my own that I know for a fact would have made me happy if I had got it as a kid, like most people do, because that would have only been fair and only been equal. that I would have got something that most other people got as kids growing up. And, you know, it breaks my heart and it crushes me to my core knowing that I missed out on and have been just all around robbed of so many things and experiences in life that so many other punk ass people got to experience since they were kids, that I really resent and that I really hate with every bit and amount of my heart. And, you know, I remember when I was even a kid, when I was 10 years old in like 2007, or maybe I wasn't 10, but either I was 10, 11, or 12, either 2007, 2008, or 9, or something like that. I remember wanting a PS3, and the only video game I wanted was Lego Star Wars The Complete Saga for the PS3. And I wanted that so bad. And I even remember asking my dad for it, because I remember when I was a kid growing up in the 2000s, I would go over to my cousin's house in California, and they had a fuck ton of video games. And you know, as a kid, I really loved my cousins. I'm not gonna lie, I really cared about them. And I was like really good friends with them. And I never thought of how spoiled they were. I never thought of the fact how privileged they were compared to me. For some reason, some odd, strange, bizarre reason, those thoughts never crossed my mind. I just never realized that. My eyes were not open at that time. My emotions of jealousy and envy didn't start until I was 15 in 2012, ever since I went to high school, which just then reminded me of my past childhood experiences of how spoiled rotten my cousins were, and then made me begin to hate them and anyone else in the world, even complete strangers who ever since they were kids grew up with their very own personal gaming consoles and video games, and as teenagers had gaming computers. Like, I started really envying and being jealous of people who got to have those things growing up that I never got to experience myself. But anyways, like, it's kind of sad knowing that when I was a little kid, I wanted something nice. I wanted something fun. I wanted something that I knew I would enjoy. Because when I was a kid growing up, every time during summer vacation I would go over to my cousin's house, I would always want to play Lego Star Wars The Complete Saga. And I also liked playing Mario Kart on the Wii. I also kind of liked playing Mario Kart Double Dash on the old GameCube way back in the day. And that made my desire and longing to have video games of my own grow and become extreme, even when I was a little kid. I mean, they definitely weren't as extreme as compared to when I was a teenager, but they were still growing. They were still in the early stages. And not only did my dad never give me a gaming console of my own growing up as a kid, even if it was just one gaming console and one video game, but he also didn't do that for any of my other siblings. And the sad thing is, even if he had, he would have had to either have given my siblings each a gaming console and video game of their own, or he would expect me to share it, and I wouldn't want to share it. I hate sharing. Especially knowing that I have way more siblings than compared to most people in America, or even in this world for that matter. And, you know, when I was a kid though, it was actually not that bad. I didn't have gaming consoles or video games as a kid growing up, Why? Because I didn't even realize that. I honestly didn't even have the slightest clue or idea of just what fun, wonderful thing I was missing out on, being robbed of, being excluded from having and experiencing growing up as a kid. I didn't know. My eyes weren't open at that time. And same thing can be said about diversity growing up. As a kid, I didn't really think of all the white kids who were experiencing diversity elsewhere in America than compared to me, who spent most of my childhood growing up in a country area. Totally separated, segregated, alienated, excluded, and distanced from people of other races and cultures, because most minorities, as well as most immigrants, choose to live in cities than compared to rural areas or even small, medium-sized towns. Especially when it comes to the most northern states here in America, the only place you're going to find most minorities or immigrants are in cities, and that is a fact. Like, even if you do see minorities or immigrants in small towns or medium-sized towns or even rural areas, it would be extremely rare. Very rare. It would be like finding a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It's that fucking rare to see a minority or to see an immigrant in a small, medium-sized town that's predominantly white, or if you were to in a rural area, which I personally never even have seen a minority or immigrant here in the rural area that I live, or even when I was growing up as a kid and living in the different rural area than the one I do now, since I have last year in 2019, because we moved from Greenville to a new rural area in like March of 2019 when I was 22. And you know, I liked being a kid because I didn't even realize or understand everything that I was deprived of, everything I was underprivileged of growing up, everything that I never got to have or experience growing up as a kid or even teenager. Now, of course, when I was a teenager, that's when I did start realizing everything that I had been missing out on, that I had been robbed of since I was even a kid, everything I had been excluded of having, and like deprived and underprivileged of ever having or experiencing myself. And you know, another thing I also never got to have or experience growing up as a teenager, and have been very deprived and underprivileged of, and I was pretty much robbed of having, unlike most people, it seems at least, was a gaming computer. And I wanted a $10,000 gaming computer since I was 16 in 2013. The year and age I should have definitely got a $10,000 gaming computer that would have made me happy. And for all the people who assume, oh, even if you would have gotten those things growing up, I don't think you would have been happy, blah, 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 all this bullshit that they assume in their mind of theirs, or in their brain of theirs, even though they don't know me, they never lived a day in my shoes or a day in my life, they never walked a mile in my shoes, so they have absolutely no idea or clue just how much I've suffered, how much torment and torture and agony and crippling depression and stress I have gone through for so many years, because I have missed out on so many things in life, so many experiences, so many things, people and places, all of which that I should have been able to experience growing up since I was even a kid, but I didn't. And that's the sad reality of my life, of my existence, compared to most other people. But, you know, I wanted a $10,000 gaming desktop computer since I was 16 in 2013. For selfish purposes? Fuck no. I wanted a $10,000 gaming desktop computer because I wanted to at least try my ass off to become a famous, successful YouTuber who possibly could have made millions of dollars a year and would have been so happy, so lucky and blessed and fortunate, and I would have helped my parents out in any way that I possibly could. Hell, I would have probably even started my own business if I would have even been able to have the privilege, opportunity, and chance to have become a famous YouTuber. If I had the materials and resources way back then, but I didn't. And it's also sad to know that I would have never been a self-pity YouTuber. I would have never been a miserable wreck. I would have never had crippling depression or stress or suicidal thoughts or anything like that if I would have had more of a way to have made money, to have gotten out of my parents' house, still fairly young, to have moved to a city when I was still maybe 18 or 19 at the latest, and when I still would have had the longing and desire to experience people of other races, or in other words, experience diversity like most other white people got to experience growing up as a kid and teenager, which I missed out on, like all around. I was robbed of, I was excluded of, I was alienated of, distanced from, and deprived and underprivileged of experiencing growing up as a kid or teenager. And, you know, I not only wanted to become a successful YouTuber so that I could have my own income and be able to easily move out when I would have been 18 or 19. What I probably would have moved out when I was 18, though, because not only is that the normal popular age to move out at, but also I would have wanted to move to a city still fairly young. And if I would have had millions of dollars saved up, I could have easily done that and easily even bought my own house as soon as I would have moved to whatever city I wanted to live in, or whatever city I wish I could have lived in growing up as a kid and teenager. And not only that, but even earlier in my teens, I could have bought my own car, I could have paid for my own food, and I could have helped my parents out with debts or bills or taxes or anything for that matter. But I wasn't able to because I didn't even have the chance, the opportunity, or the privilege, or the materials or resources of becoming a famous YouTube gamer, or even a famous YouTuber in general, because I know I would not have just done gameplays or whatever of video games. Like, I would have done like movie reviews, I would have shown my reaction to like movie trailers or whatever, or video game trailers. I would have honestly just had a variety of things that I would have done, even just on one channel. Like, I would have definitely wanted to switch it up, to not just do the same old thing every single video. And you know, I would have just been in a much better place right now. Much better place. Emotionally, mentally, and physically. And you know what's shitty also is the fact that when I was a teenager, I had an aunt from California who's rich, whose name will go unknown, who gave me and my siblings $5,000 each. But when I say she gave me and my siblings $5,000 each, she actually gave it to my dad. And the reason she did that is because she told him specifically, before even handing him $5,000 for each one of my siblings, she said, promise me this will only be used for educational purposes. And of course my dad promised her. But you know what sucks is the fact that I wanted to build my own gaming computer from scratch. But I wanted to build a $5,000 one. But that would have still been educational, even if I would have wasted all the money on it. And if anything, it's possible I probably wouldn't have even spent all 5,000 of it. I would have probably only spent, I don't know, 3,000 or 4,000 and maybe had 1,000 left. I don't know. And, you know, my dad would have agreed to do that if I chose to build a shitty piece of junk, piece of absolute trash computer that would have sucked complete ass. And I didn't want to do that. And then I remember him saying, well, when you're 18, you can go to the bank and take all the money out and like spend it on yourself and whatever you want. So then I was really looking forward to turning 18. Then when 18 came, that never ended up happening. He changed his mind, either that or he didn't even remember saying that years ago when I was 16 or 17 years old, or even 15 for that matter. And I became really pissed off, and you know, at first I thought he was going to allow me to build a gaming computer of my desire and choice, but then he wasn't going to allow me to, so then I decided to give my dad the computer parts that I bought while selling one of them online, which was a 27-inch, 600 and like, I don't know, $30 gaming monitor, and I sold it to some guy, I think in Florida, on eBay. And even when I got the $600, I didn't get it. It went to my dad. It went back to my dad. So yeah, that's pretty much my life. And, you know, now I just honest to God, hate gaming computers. Even if I ever do get a gaming computer, I'm still going to have the thought that, man, I should have had this as a teenager growing up. I deserved to have a $10,000 gaming desktop computer growing up since I was 16, or at least a $5,000 one, or $4,000 or $3,500 one at the very cheapest. But no, I didn't. And not only that, but also I should have had gaming consoles growing up as a kid. I know if I would have had that, then I would have been more prone to have gotten a job in my teenagers, since I would have had an idea and a taste of what it feels like to have nice things growing up. And as a teenager, I would have had a more longing for even better things, more expensive things, so I would have definitely tried harder to get a job in my teens when we still lived in the town of Greenville. But because growing up as a kid, I never had a taste or feel what having nice things of my own feels like, I didn't even want to get a job at all. I didn't even want to try, because I knew that most kids are given gaming consoles and video games growing up as kids for their birthdays or bitch-ass Christmas. And, you know, same thing with diversity. Like, and it's sad because gaming consoles aren't a living thing. They're just an object. They're a thing. And yet I hate them. I may get some of them, but I will still hate them that I didn't have them growing up as a kid. Same thing if I even do get a gaming computer, especially keeping in mind I'm almost 24 fucking years old, that I should have had a gaming desktop and a gaming laptop, honestly, since I was 16 years old in 2013, and I wouldn't have suffered so much hell emotionally and mentally, and I would have used it to good use, and I know for a fact I would have, or at least I would have definitely tried, and I would have probably tried other ways to make money online too. Hell, I would have probably even tried to make my own video game if I would have learned computer programming or whatever, but I didn't. And you know, it just honestly breaks my heart and crushes me to the core, emotionally and mentally, knowing that I hate gaming desktop computers and I hate gaming laptops. And every time I look at them online, even see photos of them, seeing videos of them, seeing other people with them, it just makes me get so full of hatred, envy, and jealousy. And every time I see kids who grew up having gaming consoles and video games of their own, it pisses me off. Same when I see and hear and come in contact with white people who got to experience diversity growing up since they were kids and teenagers, it pisses me off. And this honestly reminds me of something, and this is the last thing I will say. Well, I'll say a few last things, honestly, but one time when my mom and I went to go pick up my youngest brother from the mental hospital in Grand Rapids, really deep in Grand Rapids, mind you, I saw these two teenage boys who looked about 13 or 14 years old. Hell, maybe 15. But I would say 14. And they were playing basketball on the sidewalk. And it was a white boy and a black boy. And I was just so full of rage when I looked out of my mom's car and I saw that white teenage boy who had a friend with a black boy who got to experience being with a black teenage boy since he was a teenager, or as a teenager himself. When I missed out on that as a teenager, I was robbed of that. I was excluded of that. I was deprived and underprivileged of that growing up. And it made me feel immense amount of hatred, anger, jealousy, and envy all towards that white teenage boy, especially knowing there's probably a lot more just like him in Grand Rapids and in other cities all over America. And, you know, this also reminds me of another time, like when you're going into the town of Greenville, there's this massive billboard that you can't miss if you're coming into Greenville from the west. And we come from the west because we live in a rural area that's outside of Greenville. So when we do go into Greenville, sometimes we come in from the west side, and there's a billboard that has all these little kids on it. And they look like they're probably all like 5-year-old kids. And there are white kids, black kids, Mexican kids, Muslim kids, Indian kids, Asian kids, all that shit. Like, it's just like a pretty much typical, overrated, popular portrayal of what diversity looks like. And even though it was just on a billboard, it still pissed me off. It still filled me with rage, anger, hatred, envy, and jealousy, knowing that there are so many white kids who do get to experience diversity just like that. And they were all in a circle, and of course they were all smiling because they were kids and they were 5-year-olds. And, you know, another reason I wouldn't really want to experience diversity now, not just because I'm almost 24 and feel like I missed out, but I say, of course, a lot of offensive things towards black Americans because I'm so pissed off at them, and especially white people who got to experience them growing up as kids and teens. We live in a time now where white people and black people are not having the best relationship because the mainstream media and the entertainment industry is just making this very obvious and clear divide and split between white people and black people who are now just arch enemies with each other, unless they're liberal white people. because most black Americans are sadly Democrats or liberals, in other words, whereas most white people are Republicans. And so two totally, completely different parties. And that's another reason why white people and black people don't really get along that well, because they have different beliefs about certain things, different opinions. But anyway, let me know what you all think in the comment section down below. I'm out.